Hi, welcome to my channel. My name is Magnus, and today we're going to talk about the first objective for the CCVS certificate, and that's explain the benefit of virtual network security. So I would say the easiest way to, figure out what Checkpoint wants you to respond on this and what Checkpoint wants you to learn during this course is to just check Checkpoint website for virtual systems. And the headline here is like Checkpoint Virtual System taps the power of virtualization to consolidate and simplify security for the private clouds. While delivering on a low cost of ownership, it enables customized security against evolving network threats. So if we scroll down here, we can see that Checkpoint want to highlight a few things, like the scalability of the product. When it comes to VSX and VSLS, and VSLS is the default option if you deploy a new system today with the latest firmware or the latest software. You can have up to 13 members within a cluster, and that's just awesome. It's more or less linear performance scaling, but keep in mind that one virtual system can still only be on one cluster member. We will talk more about this during the architecture part, and that's the next video. And then you have the security domains or separate security domains. And more or less each security system or virtual system, the firewall, it can have its own policy, own routing table, it can be in its own domain. So it's perfect for MSPs, and that's one of the user cases as well. And then you have the security consolidation, meaning you can deploy multiple virtual systems on the same physical hardware. And that's just awesome. And that's part of the virtualization and the reason why we go in this course. So if you scroll down here, we can see the first part, and that's the security consolidation. So when Checkpoint refers to security consolidation, it's Checkpoint Virtual Systems enables organization to consolidate their infrastructure by creating multiple virtual security gateways on a single device. But the next statement here, delivering deep cost savings and seamless security and infrastructure consolidation. The deep cost savings, that's debatable. I mean, that depends on how large your organization is. How large is your requirements? The VSX, it adds complexity. The start cost of starting with a VSX is higher than a normal security gateway. But if you were planning to buy like multiple gateways because you wanted one gateway for the test environment, one for production, one for DMZ, one for lab, well, maybe you can consolidate some of these to one virtual system and just add specific resources, or you have your specific rules to that virtual system. But just saying like it's a deep cost savings, well, it depends on your user case. And the target audience for VSX is large organizations and MSPs. And then if we continue, the ability to tailor security policy for each virtual system enables administrators to break down large complex network security policies into smaller, more granular and more manageable policies. And that's true. If you have multiple gateways for multiple purposes, let's say you have a guest network, then you can only add the guest rules for the guest VS. So that's why it's a lot simpler, and you can have multiple policies and you can spread them out on multiple virtual systems. So that's awesome, and that's one of the reasons why it works really well for MSPs and large organizations. And the next statement here is customize security policy based on business requirement and minimize the complexity and create better security practices to meet demanding business needs. I think this is referring to that when you have a VSX, you can enable specific blades for each virtual system. So you don't need to have like all bells and whistles on all virtual systems. So if you don't have, for example, internet access for one of the virtual systems, you don't need to have like URL filtering or similar functions. So you can pick and choose like which blades should you enable on each virtual system within this VSX. You still need to license the complete VSX for the blades that you want to be able to enable for one virtual system. So then we have the linear scalability. And this is one of the nicest things when it comes to VSLS, that you can start off with a cluster on 2 nodes, and then you can add a third, a fourth, up to 13 members within the same cluster. So this is really nice. But keep in mind that each virtual system can only be active on one node. So one specific virtual system, in this case one firewall, can only maximum get allocated the performance of one node from the cluster. So if you have 13 gateways within a cluster that builds the VSX cluster, it will not load sharing across all for them if you only have one virtual system. So for VSX to be efficient, you need to be an organization that have multiple VSS, in this case firewalls, that you can place and load share across different members within a VSX cluster. So the nice thing within VSLS is also that you can allocate resources to a specific VS, meaning you can allocate VS instances. It's more or less a core. So if one VSS should only be able to have, I don't know, 15,000 connections and it should only have one CPU core, you can give that to one specific VS and it will never be able to take more than that. Then you can have a different VS that you allocate like 10 cores to. If your gateway or your appliance or your open server has more than 10 cores, so you can allocate 10. Keep in mind that some cores need to be able to, or some cores are used for like the interfaces and so on, so you cannot take all of the cores. But this gives some nice flexibility, and you can also oversubscribe VSS, so you can allocate more cores than you actually use. But then you need to think about what happens during a maintenance window, or what happens if you have a failure of one or more cluster members. And this slide is really important to be aware of, that each virtual system has its own routing table. It has its own security policy. So you can have overlapping IP addresses. And that's why it's really good for MSPs as well, because then you can have one virtual system per customer. And this is a really normal, common way to deploy it. Or you can have a production environment within an organization, and then you can have an exact replica that is a stage of your production environment. So you can actually test it fully with the same IP address, the same name, same security policy, everything the same, without colliding with other one. So this is important to be aware of, that each virtual system acts more or less independently. Yes, they use the same physical hardware, but the rest is like its own gateway, its own firewall. Similar to it would be a physical hardware. So this is really nice. As I mentioned several times within this video already, one of the biggest user cases for VSX is for MSPs. Combining MDS together with VSX, that gives a real multi-tenant environment. But that's a different certificate, and if you're interested within MDS and for like MSPs, check out my other playlist for MSPs combining with VSX. VSX is getting more and more common within normal enterprise environment as well. Especially if you're starting to segment your network and you need different features and you need different routing and so on for different firewalls within your own organization, then VSX can be a really good option that you should look into. So having the option to spin up new virtual firewalls within a few minutes or a few hours with all the planning that goes into it, instead of like purchasing a dedicated firewall cluster, figure out how much bandwidth and throughput does it need, who is going to pay for it, what is the delivery time, especially now in COVID, it's insane delivery times. Actually not for Checkpoint, but for many other stuff, it's really long delivery time. So this is beneficial when it comes to time as well. And keep in mind, I don't know if I have said this earlier in the video, but VSX can be run on both open servers and on Checkpoint appliances. So you could have additional open servers lying around as spare parts. They're not super expensive to buy new servers that just lying around as spare parts. And if you need more performance within your VSX cluster, you just go to Checkpoint and buy that specific license that you need, instead of waiting for the hardware. Buying open servers is a lot cheaper than to buy appliances that just lie on the shelf. But I think this is it for this video, so I hope to see you in the next one. Take care.